I have been wanting to do a deep dive with you guys about what I have learned and experienced when it comes to baking with more freshly milled whole wheat flour in our home. We've had a lot of benefits and I've learned a ton, and I want to do a little mini series here with you on YouTube and really do some deep dives. Now today I want to dive into the history of our wheat and what has happened to our bread over the course of time and where we are at today. I'm hoping to just open your eyes to potential problems with our fluffy, white, convenient bread products and how these may be impacting your health. My desire to share this with you really comes from personal experience. I would say we have been almost 99% eating bread products made from home with freshly milled flour for like the last 2 years. And I've had a grain mill a lot longer than that, but I would just dabble in it occasionally. But after learning more about the benefits of freshly milled flour, I really just went all in with my family, and I was amazed by the health benefits we saw almost immediately. Once we went all in, here are some of the things that I noticed. One of the biggest things, like first day eating several servings of freshly milled whole wheat bread products that I made at home, I noticed my energy levels changing drastically. I could go about my day and get everything done. We run a very busy lifestyle and I would not have an energy crash, and I just felt like I had sufficient energy. I noticed that for all members of my family. Something else that we noticed was benefits in our skin and hair. A lot of you have asked what kind of hair products I use and skin products. I use nothing special. I believe that our skin and hair are representative of what we put inside of our body. So I noticed a big change in healthier hair and healthier skin. Some members of our family had moderate to severe digestive problems like bloating, constipation, indigestion. These all but went away, and we noticed if we would ever like go out to eat, or if my kids were at friends' houses or parties and they would consume like pizza with white flour or other products, that those problems would come back. So we could at least not deal with those problems when we were eating the majority of our diet with freshly milled whole grain flour. I had my son who was dealing with pretty bad eczema, and that has completely cleared up. Another thing that was amazing as a mother was like seasonal sickness. If sickness, flu, colds was going around, my kids often didn't catch it, and if they did, they would get over it very quickly. And a lot of times when one person of your family has the flu, you just expect everyone else will get it. Well, that didn't happen around our home and still doesn't. It just seems like what's in the bread, which we'll talk about, really helps your immune system and makes everyone stronger and more capable of fighting illness. I noticed personally, I stopped having like cravings for sweets particularly. And this one is like proven by lab work. Both my husband and I were struggling with high cholesterol. So much so that they suggested medication, but I had heard that real bread made with freshly milled flour could help cholesterol, so we just used bread as our medicine, and later did blood work and have found that our cholesterol levels are at a healthy level. As a woman, I noticed more regular cycles, way less cramping and discomfort, especially for my teenage girls, if we were eating the majority of real bread. And my husband has dealt with a lot of pains in his body that are inflammatory in nature, like plantar fasciitis, pain in his joints and his back. He was amazed when I was talking to him about what we've noticed. He's like, I just don't have those pains anymore. So I believe it decreases overall inflammation in the body. And then of course, health aside, when you're buying wheat berries and milling them at home and bread is a staple of your diet, it really cuts down on monthly expenses as far as groceries. So we've noticed improvement on our budgeting. So that was just a brief introduction on the benefits. We're going to dive more into that in other videos, but I wanted to explain all that so that you could understand why I'm actually really so passionate about this topic and why I want to dive a little deeper with you. So many people are walking around with nutrient deficiencies, and I have found it actually helpful to go and get some blood work done and see where I might be lacking That, or you can also focus on what stage of life you're in and then learn about what kinds of things you can do to help support your body at that stage of life. Sometimes it's helpful to add supplements to a healthy diet to kind of fill in the gaps of things that you need. And this is where I was excited to learn about a company called Needed. This is a company created by two mothers and nutritionists who are very passionate about helping women support their bodies through all stages of life. And for me right now, that looks like perimenopause. So I'm trying to find products that will support me during this stage of life. Perimenopause can actually trigger a ton of changes. We all know the common symptoms like hot flashes, brain fog, mood swings, menstrual irregularities, bone loss susceptibility, cardiovascular risks, and so much more. Well, Needed has a line of perimenopause multivitamin products and supports that offer really targeted nutrition to support any woman at this stage of life. I really like their Peri Multi Powder. They also have a Peri Multi pill that you can swallow, but both of these products are really great to take every day during this stage of life for me. I really like the Peri Multi Powder. It's just easy to stir into a little cup of milk or throw into a smoothie and just get it easily taken that way. And this is kind of what I'm using right now to support me during this stage. I've also been taking a couple of their others. This one is a supplement for stress support, and I like this collagen protein. We know that we lose the ability to produce as much collagen as we age, and so it's nice to have a support. Again, this is a powder form. I can throw it in with the Peri Multi supplement powder, mix it all together, and just easily get it down and taken every day. The Peri Multi powders contain 22 nutrients that fight depletion. We're talking things like your B vitamins, B6, B12, biotin, vitamin D, magnesium, zinc. They're all dosed specifically for perimenopausal transition. So these things will help support my body as it's going through these changes, help with the big mood swings, the hormone fluctuations. It can support healthy metabolism, skin and hair, lots of great stuff as my body is looking down the road at some changes. Again, you've got that powdered form or the capsule form. Take it however is easiest for you, however is easiest for you to remember. Needed is being so generous and offering you guys 20% off your first order, whether that's a one-time purchase or if you want to sign up for their already discounted subscriptions and plans. You can use my code KEEPER at checkout. I will also leave links down in the description as well as that code so you can go check them out. Huge thanks to Needed for sponsoring this video. So now that you know, I want to dive deeper in this video on the history of wheat and where it started and what is being done about our wheat products today. I think this is really important to talk about first because we actually live in a modern day world where there is a fear of bread. More and more people are going to gluten-free diets or being diagnosed with diseases that say they are unable to eat anything with gluten. And so we have equated gluten/bread as the bad guy. It makes us fat, it makes us sick, when really it's more helpful to review what has been done to our wheat products from farming to consumption and the whole process in between. Again, I think this is important because once you understand the history and the processes, you may be able to see that it's not the gluten after all, and there is a way back from this and that you have total control over in your home to make bread a positive, nourishing, wonderful thing for you and your family. As I share some of the historical facts, I want to let you know that I will be linking to as many resources as I can that I have found. I'll leave them in the description below if you want to deep dive. But a lot of my knowledge and experience is basically jumping off that of Sue Becker. I don't know if you've heard of her, but I really think she is the leading content creator right now to educating us on the benefits of real bread. And she calls it real bread, and I'm going to follow suit with that because real bread is actually bread made from freshly milled flour at home. And that is the bread that can heal us and give us so many of these benefits. Whereas there is also dead bread out in the world, the white fluffy stuff, which is mainly just starch and gluten, and has been treated a lot of ways, which we'll talk about, and that might be the stuff that's making us sick. So big shout out to Sue Becker. I encourage you to go check out her work at breadbeckers.com, see all that she offers. If you're really interested and want to like deep dive, go listen to her podcast, go view her work on YouTube. We're just doing a mini series here because I know a lot of you have asked me to share more information. So I'm going to share what I know and have experienced from my perspective, which a lot of times has also been taught by Sue Becker. So we're gonna have some overlap, but also I'm going to be sharing some additional things I've learned and studied, and also, of course, my own personal experience mixed in. But when it comes to the history of grains, and wheat in particular, we can go way back to the ancient world. Even like ancient biblical times, we see evidence and text showing that grains and bread were a huge staple of life. They have found ancient grains left in like tombs and pyramids of the ancient Egyptians. Now, this was sometimes symbolic. It wasn't like used as a storehouse for wheat per se, but they would leave, according to my research, they would leave wheat kernels whole and intact, and they found them with all the nutrients still intact because it's like the perfect storable food. They would find them in there, and they believed that the Egyptians believed that it was to sustain the dead, which is interesting. So we can see that they viewed wheat and barley in particular as life-sustaining in life and in death. There are a lot of hieroglyphics that portray like the whole harvesting and growing cycles of wheat, so it was a huge part of ancient civilizations. Of course, we see bread and wheat talked about a lot in the Old and New Testament. Christ himself even compared himself to the bread of life, something so sustaining and vital for each of us. So with all of the evidence of the ancient origins of wheat and bread, it really does make you wonder, how did we get to an era of time where bread is bad? Bread makes you fat. Bread makes us sick. Don't eat bread. How did we come from there to now? And so that's what we're going to explore, and we're going to get really specific with what happened in specific eras of time. And I think the biggest change that we can actually put a marker on is during the Industrial Revolution era. So this is mid-1800s to early 1900s. We had a huge change and shift in the world around our wheat, and it made a big difference that we can actually track, and scientists and experts have actually pinpointed and tried to resolve. And if you think about this is not that long ago if we examine the history of time, and a lot of this actually happened in the US during the Industrial Revolution era. So it made a big difference here in America, and that has impacted the world. So before the Industrial Revolution era, communities were centered around a mill. Wheat was still really important, and so they had a main hub for milling wheat, and communities would build around that because it was so vital and important. And so of course the homemakers or the bakers, they would have to go to the mill and get their wheat freshly milled, and then they would take home what they need to bake. They couldn't do this in bulk because once you mill the wheat, it breaks open the bran, the germ, the endosperm, and that opens up all the oil. And then it goes rancid very quickly and loses its nutrient very quickly, which we'll talk more about in future videos. But this is why it was so centrally important for communities to have a mill or some way to be able to stone ground the wheat so that they could then bake bread. And this bread was whole grain. It had everything intact. So we had the bran and the germ. The bran is kind of the brown stuff. It is so full of fiber, and we know our bodies need fiber. Fiber is huge at detoxifying and keeping our digestive system running like a well-oiled machine. And so that fiber was really important, or is really important in our diets. And then the germ is like the powerhouse of the wheat grain. It contains the oils, specifically vitamin E oil, which is huge for protecting cells and nourishing cells. So there's also tons of nutrients found in the germ, and of course the bran. Now, there's also the endosperm part of the wheat kernel or seed. I think it's technically a seed. So that endosperm is essentially just the carbohydrates, the starch, and that's where we get basically the white flour. Now, even in ancient times, there was evidence of bran and germ being sifted out. Even before the Industrial Revolution era, there were people who would sift out the bran and germ mechanically or by hand or however they did it to produce the lighter, fluffier flour. And a lot of times this was just like meant for royalty or I don't know, for important people, but the majority of people would just consume all the bran, all the germ, all the endosperm, and they would get the entire benefit of the wheat in their everyday diet. Okay, so the Industrial Revolution, mid-1800s, rolls in, and we get still roller mills and facilities built around producing wheat. So we move from stone mills to still mills, and we have a lot more capabilities, and the industry changes. They begin to realize that if they sift out the germ and the bran, they get a shelf-stable product, and this white flour with just the endosperm can last a really long time. And so communities don't need a mill anymore. They can sell this white flour for cheaper, one, and also it lasts longer. So there was a huge convenience thing wrapped around this, and so it kind of exploded. Flour got really popular, white flour in particular. And then the industry also figured out that they could feed animals or make animal feed with the bran and germ. And so they get a whole nother money-making industry built around these still roller mills. But what's even more was the customers were happy. We have homemakers who can now keep flour in their home for long periods of time. And it's white and fluffy and delicious. It's way easier to work with. It's more cost effective. And so, you know, from the outside looking in, this seemed like a wonderful thing. And that's when white breads became the norm, and your more like whole wheat breads were more for like those who were in poverty. So it kind of switched, and the majority of people are now eating endosperm only white flour bread products. Now keep in mind, when this all happened, there are actually 20, probably more than 20, they say 20 plus essential nutrients found in the bran and germ. These are now taken out of bread, even though bread remained a staple of life. I mean, a lot of you have probably grown up with like the food pyramid, and pastas, grains, and breads are still seen as what should be the majority of our diet. So even though you can get lots of nutrients from fruits and vegetables, bread was still a mainstay, and we were able to create products like crackers, shelf-stable pastas. All this shelf-stable food production began happening because now white flour was shelf-stable, and they could make so many other products also shelf-stable, cost-effective, yummy, you name it. And so we get this huge popularity and growth of white flour and all those wonderful nutrients being taken out of our diets. And so can you imagine what happened? Well, what happened was disease and illness went rampant. And there were a few very specific ones that they could actually trace back to the lack of nutrients that were normally found in bread. So in the about 1920s to 1940s, so only like a few decades after the whole Industrial Revolution era, they began to notice a lot of diseases and contributed to the fact that the bread was lacking. Now these diseases, specific ones, were one, pellagra. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a niacin deficiency. Niacin is in abundance in real bread. But when they took all that out, they noticed people with major skin lesions, a lot of dermatitis issues, dementia, and mental health. It's actually been said around that time that like the insane asylums of the day were filling up, and a lot of times they didn't even have room for patients because mental health and dementia were so bad. Of course, pellagra would lead to death. So they call those the 3 Ds: dementia, dermatitis, death. And this was particularly bad in the southern US states where there were poor communities that relied on white flour for their diets mainly. But they say millions were affected. Tens of thousands of people died from pellagra. They also, for a time, wondered if it was an infectious disease, but they quickly learned that it was more diet related. So another illness, sorry, I'm looking down here at my notes for all this stuff, but another illness and disease that popped up was beriberi. And this is a thiamine and vitamin B1 deficiency. Again, these things are found in real bread. A lot of the things that happened with beriberi was nerve damage, heart failure, so we get major heart disease spreading across the world, a lot of swelling and edema issues, and if you're like me, you're thinking, we still have a lot of these problems, so that's interesting, isn't it? But a lot of this was happening in Western diets and in Asia, which is interesting because in Asia they were doing pretty much the same thing to rice, stripping brown rice and refining that and taking out the nutrients. So we also saw a lot of beriberi in Asian countries. Another huge problem that I think persists today is anemia, which is iron deficiency. So a lot of people were weak, fatigued, pale, just overall sick looking. Iron absorption's very, very important for our overall health. And it's amazing that real bread is so full of iron. Another big one, and I find this one the most interesting, and I would actually like to dive in more to this, but there was a lot of neural tube defects. We're talking like birth defects. Babies would come out with spine and brain malformations. Perhaps you know about this. Well, they contribute a lot of this to folate deficiency. Now, folate is the natural nutrient found in real bread in abundance. And so when we all started to eat dead bread, they started to notice these neural tube defects. Well, what was the solution? I know when I was having babies, the doctors would just pound it in my face to take folic acid supplements. It was like a necessity, right? This was the synthetic form of folate. I'm not going to say too much about that because I can't prove anything, but there is more research coming out that may stem from folic acid supplements, the synthetic form, and it could possibly be contributing to things like autism, ADHD. There's the MTHFR gene mutation that is being talked about a lot. Now, I'm not saying that folic acid is the cause, but there's some interesting correlations that I think we really need more research in. So just kind of sad that all of these things came to be when, if we would have just kept bread like it was intended, we may have been able to and may still be able to avoid a lot of these really sad disease and illness problems. And it's interesting because we see a nation that's actually eating just fine. They have all the calories they need, but yet they're malnourished. So there's some serious problems like that. We even deal with an obese person who is also malnourished. So those are just like a summary of some of the big problems that they noticed in the 1920s to 1940s. And now let's talk about what they did about it. So in the 1940s to 1960s, we enter what they call the Green Revolution era. And this is when governments noticed all these diseases and illnesses, and they required that our white flour be fortified. Now, this means that they were to put the nutrients back into the bread. They knew it was the problem. And instead of putting the germ and bran back into the bread, they put synthetic forms of the nutrients that the bread already originally had in it into the white flour, and just a handful of them. Of course, if you know very much about nutrition, it's more of a complete view of nutrients and how they work together and how they absorb in the body together. But this enriched flour did seem to solve some of the problems. So the ones that were put back were synthetic forms of niacin, thiamine, riboflavin, and iron. So these are some B vitamins, and then of course the iron. And during the Green Revolution, they also developed dwarf wheat. Now, I don't have enough proof or knowledge to be able to say whether this is a good or bad thing, but I'm just gonna say how it is, or what I've learned anyway. So what we call our modern wheat, which is your hard red, your hard white, soft white, a lot of these modern forms of wheat, during the Green Revolution times, they figured out how to hybridize the wheat to make it so it would grow better and basically make the farming practices improved upon. Now, this could be a good thing, this could be a bad thing, but one thing I want to make sure that you don't get confused, as far as I know, this does not mean that they genetically modified the wheat. So our modern wheat, the hard red, the hard whites, I cook with them quite frequently. They have not genetically modified. In fact, as far as I know, there is no genetically modified wheat in America. I do believe there's development being done about it, and we should all be very resistant towards any genetically modified wheat. But these are more hybridized, meaning they like cross plants. And this happens all the time. If we want watermelon without black seeds, if we want crops to be able to handle certain temperatures better, they basically hybridize them, do something with the genes of the plants to come up with a better crop. And so that's what our modern day dwarf wheat was done. The dwarf wheats are shorter so that they don't collapse in the field. They're more disease resistant. Your hard reds and your hard whites have more protein in it, so we get a stronger gluten structure. So it really is beneficial. Whether or not that's destroying nutrients or essential protein structures in the wheat so that we don't digest them as well as maybe ancient wheats, all that is kind of up for debate. But that's also what happened during the Green Revolution era of the 1940s and 50s. We were getting enriched flour, and we were also getting improvements on the wheat farming practices. And this made wheat a huge crop specifically for America, and it became even more of a staple in our diet and in our farming practices. Now, there are some things that I do think are negative that has been done as a result of wheat farming becoming so popular and essential for farmers. And that has to do with what they're actually putting on the crops. So I can't say exactly what farmers are doing, but at some point in the field or in the dirt, there is chemical spraying. So your pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, basically glyphosate. You can do your own research on that and make your own opinion. But because wheat farming is now so big, they have to come up with these practices that control weeds, control insects, control fungus and stuff like that. So chemicals are also being sprayed on our wheat. In addition to that, there is chemical bleaching. I'm not really sure what the point and necessity of that is. I don't know if it's just to make our flour whiter, but this bleaching agent scares me. I'll just say that. And I don't think it should be something that we consume in our wheat, especially if flour is a mainstay in our diet, whether that's through cereals, pastas, crackers, you name it. If we're consuming a lot of it, it could really have some negative effects, I think. Okay, so let's sum it up. We enriched our flour, added back some synthetic forms of nutrients that were lost, and we improved farming practices. So we have to now ask ourselves, are we healthier than ever? Are we better off with our wheat? And I think it doesn't take a whole lot of reflection, or it doesn't take rocket science for us to question if we are better off. Now, we can't pinpoint the cause of everything, but we can look at just specifically like our children. What kind of diseases and problems are they facing? There are still neurological problems. We got autism, ADHD, anemia, iron deficiency is still huge amongst women and children specifically, I think. Kids have more allergies than ever, like peanut allergies, wheat allergies to everything. I swear we have just more kids walking around with allergic reactions to so many things. Skin issues, eczema, warts, rashes, reactions to things, those are huge. Our mental health, which can be contributed to a lot of things in this modern era, but I don't know that we're any better off mentally. Dementia is still something that both my grandmothers have gone through, and they lived during these 1920s to 50s and 60s. Gluten-free lifestyles, people who just cannot tolerate wheat even to have their food touch anywhere where wheat has been, full-blown celiac diseases. So yeah, are we better off? I'm not convinced. These changes have, in the big scope of things, have happened in such little amount of time. We're talking, a century of time, and things have shifted so much. And I do wonder, a few decades from now, are the future generations going to look back and be like, what on earth did they do to the bread? And why couldn't they see what was going on? So I actually think we are beginning to see, and I'm encouraged by that. And this is why I'm on here, because I want to encourage the change for my children and for my grandchildren and for my great-grandchildren. I hope we're able to stop some of these childhood illnesses and illnesses that we face as adults because of the last century of huge diet changes that has happened in the world. So I'm hoping that we can all be a little more educated. And I don't think that a big change is going to happen with the governments. I think this has to be a grassroots effort, and I see that happening. It has to be you and I talking about this, experimenting in our kitchen, going back to freshly milled whole grains and reaping the benefits from that. It's going to start in the homes. It's going to start with the keeper of the home, and that's my life's work, is to encourage and support the keeper of the home, which is why I think this is so important to talk about. And when the changes in our wheat was happening, there actually were people talking about it. One of the main characters of history that really spoke out against sifted flour and just taking out the bran and germ and eating the endosperm only, his name was Sylvester Graham. And he was about the mid-1800s, and he was strongly promoting eating the whole wheat and keeping it intact. In fact, he produced what's called graham flour, and from that we get the graham cracker. And I think he would actually be rolling in his grave to find out what the graham cracker is today. It is the farthest thing from healthy and nutritious that he really wanted graham flour to be. He believed that removing parts of the grain just made food less nourishing and less pure. He was convinced before even all the results that removing them would lead to health and disease. And this was before vitamins were even discovered, which makes his ideas, I think, more notable he must have been a very observant man and could see what would happen or what did happen to people when they were not eating the whole wheat kernel in their bread. Sylvester Graham also taught that our diet would influence our mental health, our physical health, and even our moral behavior. So he talked about this during the time of the Second Great Awakening, if you know anything about that, or it was also the time of the temperance movement, where people were trying to live more healthy lifestyles, avoid alcohol and drinking and stuff like that, that affected moral behavior. So he was all kind of interconnected into that period of time and believed that keeping our nutritious whole wheat intact and not sifting it at all would actually lead to better moral behavior, mental and physical health. So he was talking about it. People have been talking about it, and yet we still moved forward with these practices that have led to some harm and disease and illness. And so I just think back to that and think, you know, it has been talked about it, we're talking about it now, and I hope we wake up a little and realize what's going on. Now, during this Second Great Awakening, or the temperance movement period, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I actually find this all very interesting and timely, because it was also at that time that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints received the word of wisdom, which is basically like a health code for us, which guides us to avoid harmful and addictive substances and to make wheat, like the word of wisdom actually says that wheat and grains should be the staff of life, like the majority of our diet. Now, I know that not all Latter-day Saints live this perfectly, but I'm trying to get the word out there that how divinely inspired the word of wisdom was, how timely it was, and how true it is to just leading good, healthy, moral lives. It really does start with our diet, and it is so important. Now, I bring all this up just to show you that our modern practices for farming wheat, for enriching it, sifting it, these things have all been pushed against, talked about, warned about, and here we are. And so let's keep pushing, let's keep talking and warning and educating and inspiring people to get our food back to how it was meant to be, specifically our breads, and to make them with freshly milled whole grain flour, and to bring it back to what it was meant to be from the beginning of time. So pay attention to what you're hearing, pay attention to the trends, pay attention to people who are teaching and educating you on what real bread is, and let's all work together to bring the bread of life back to the home and back to the table for ourselves and for our families. And so I'm going to try to do that for the next few videos and inspire you as the keeper of your home to do that and to reap the health benefits, to see how it changes your life. And honestly, real bread is like the most delicious thing on this earth. And it's not that hard to make. We're gonna go over how to mill it. We're gonna go over what types of grains there are. Next time I want to talk to you more about the benefits of freshly milled flour and deep dive into that. So I hope you'll join me. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and we'll go over all of these things together. Oh, and I almost forgot to tell you about my book. So I am making these little niche books. This one is all on yeast breads with freshly milled flour. So these are my 21 go-to recipes for things like a basic sandwich loaf, French bread, let's see, we got bagels, pretzels, pizza dough, several different kinds of rolls, hamburger buns. Anyway, these are like the yeast breads that I make very regularly, have tested these recipes, they're tried and true, and I put them all in a book, mostly for my posterity's sake, but I produced enough that hopefully you guys can grab one as well. I have digital copies if you just want a digital version, or we've got some printed. So I'll leave a link down in the description where you can grab this. I am currently working on a quick breads recipe book. So we'll have these little books to just pull from. You don't have to get on the internet, you don't have to deal with ads and whatnot and finding recipes. You're gonna have all your favorites right here in this book with me to easily grab. So give me some time. I'm almost finished up with the Quick Breads cookbook. We have the yeast breads recipe for you, and then I want to work on developing a dessert one as well. So I'm really excited about this project. It's a huge passion project, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. But for now, I just hope you feel inspired, a little more educated on the history of our wheat. So go and tell your friends and family about it and inspire them as well. And make sure you're subscribed. I'll be back very soon to share more about whole wheat in this whole wheat series and to inspire you as the keeper of your home.